Hey, what is up everyone, this is Linus, you're watching TechLineHD, and you know, Kodak has been in the industry for almost 130 years, and back in 1941 they produced the Kodak Ektra pocket camera. Back in the day it had quite a few innovative features, but right now the company wants to reinvent that camera with a phone, which is called the Kodak Ektra. This phone actually looks like a pocket camera as it has a huge camera bump that packs a 21 megapixel Sony sensor and a lot more other features. But this phone costs almost $550 US. Is it worth the price? Stay tuned to find out. The phone ships with all the usual stuff, and some extras include a strap if you'd like to carry the phone as a pocket camera. When it comes to the design, the Kodak Ektra looks more like a camera rather than a phone. The back is covered with a leather finish and it has a grip just like some other cameras. Well, it is not specified whether it is a genuine leather or not, but it feels kind of nice to the touch. The star of the show is an enormous camera bump that packs a lot of stuff, but it adds extra 4mm to the already thick 10mm profile of the phone. Also, the device weighs 163 grams. Once you see that huge camera bump, you may expect a custom-made sensor, but the Kodak Ektra uses a 21 megapixel Sony IMX230 image sensor that we have already seen on numerous devices. Obviously, the sensor itself doesn't do the entire job, that's why it is coupled with f2.0 aperture Kodak 6-element lens, 6-axis optical image stabilization, phase detection autofocus, and dual-tone, dual-LED flash. Also, the camera uses the Gorilla Glass for scratch resistance and Kodak's non-reflecting lens coating. Another camera-centric feature is a two-stage camera shutter key, which is tactile just like any other buttons. However, I don't like the placement of the power button. Even after using the phone for a couple of weeks, I tend to click the volume keys to unlock the phone. One thing that really disappoints me is that the phone uses a plastic frame instead of a metal one. To be honest, the phone would look much more premium if it had a metal chassis. In other words, the device looks kind of cheap to me. The Ektra sports a 5 inches 1080p display, which is plenty sharp and vibrant for everyday use, but the problem is the huge bezels on each side that makes the phone huge. Honestly, these are probably the largest bezels you're going to see in a phone that costs over $500. On the top, we have a 13 megapixels camera and LED notification light, and on the bottom there are nicely backlit capacitive keys. However, I always prefer the back button on the left side, and this layout is just annoying to me. The sound quality via the headset jack is decent, but it is not really impressive. As for the loudspeaker, it is placed on the camera grip, which is great since you won't cover it easily with your fingers. What is not so great, the sound quality. While it's not bad, there are plenty of cheaper phones with better loudspeakers. If you consider the Kodak Ektra more like a digital camera, it is quite comfortable to hold it in the landscape mode. Since it is a phone after all, holding it in the portrait mode is not comfortable at all, mainly due to the grip and rectangular shape of the device. Another thing that disappoints me is that there is no fingerprint scanner. Seriously, even $100 phones have this feature. Since this is a camera-centric phone, let's jump into the camera section. You can quickly launch the camera by double pressing the dedicated camera button. Also, you can take the pictures very fast by just pressing and holding the shutter key. The camera app has quite an intuitive touchscreen DSLR dial with haptic touch. There are quite a few scene selection modes like bokeh, portrait, sports, macro, landscape, and so on. Also, there are some other basic settings like the ability to change the resolution and so on. The manual mode allows you to play with some settings like the shutter speed, ISO, exposure, white balance, and so on. Speaking of ISO, you can crank it up to 6400, well, at the expense of a lot of noise in the image. When it comes to the image quality, you would expect the Kodak Ektra to blow your mind, but honestly, I'm not impressed. Well, obviously, the phone can take some good-looking photos that are pretty sharp and detailed thanks to the 21-megapixel sensor. However, there could be more sharpness and detail in most of the shots. Also, the colors look natural, but I would love to see some more punchiness and saturation. I miss the edge-to-edge sharpness in a lot of pictures, and finally, even though I took most of the photos on the cloudy day, the pictures clearly look underexposed. On a positive note, the bokeh mode allows you to take some really nice looking pictures with a shallow depth of field, but we've already seen this feature on a lot of other phones. The low-light camera performance is kind of mediocre. I took most of the pictures side by side with a Samsung Galaxy S7 Edge for a reference. While the S7 Edge software comes into play with the noise reduction and exposure compensation, it is obvious that the KODAK Ektra's photos have more noise and less detail. I tried to make the best of the manual mode and I played with the ISO levels, but the pictures came out unusable to me. When it comes to the video, I could not show you any 4K video samples. I don't really understand why KODAK thinks that using the H.265 video format for 4K video is great. Sure, it has the benefits of smaller file size, but it's not compatible with neither YouTube nor the majority of video players. The 1080p video looks pretty good, but the autofocus is kind of jumping all the time. Also, the 6-axis optical image stabilization sounds really impressive on paper, but it does not really perform well in real life. The 13-megapixels front-facing camera can produce some really nice selfies, and I have no complaints here.
Currently I'm shooting with the KODAK Ektra. I'm shooting with a front-firing camera, and I just checked the video settings that it can shoot at the resolution of only 480p,
However, the stock camera app allows you to shoot selfie videos only at 480p resolution, which leads to a terrible video quality. As far as hardware, the KODAK Ektra is powered by the MediaTek Helio X20 chip with 3GB of RAM and 32GB of storage, which is expandable via the microSD card slot. The gaming performance is pretty good, and the phone is able to handle some 3D games like Asphalt 8 or Nova 3 on the highest graphics without any issues. Well, just a few skip frames there and there. On the other hand, the phone tends to heat up quite quickly. When it comes to the user interface, the KODAK Ektra runs on the stock-looking Android 6.0 with just a few extra features that are mostly related to photography. Some apps like Super 8 allows you to apply various filters for both still images and videos. Well, it's a pretty cool feature to play with and make your videos look different. The last photography-related app is the KODAK Prints, which aims to ease up the process of printing out your photos. As for user interface performance, it runs fast and fluid almost all the time, but the phone tends to get quite warm if you have a lot of apps running in the background. As far as connectivity goes, I don't have many complaints, but the earpiece sound quality could be slightly better. The voices sound slightly muffled. Other features like GPS, Bluetooth, Wi-Fi, etc. work fine. The KODAK Ektra has a 3000 mAh battery that performs quite well if you use the phone just for the basic stuff. You will be able to get around 5 hours of screen on time, but if you use the phone more intensively like I did, you should expect just above 3 hours of screen on time, which is not really impressive. Finally, the supply charger fully charges the phone in almost 2 hours. Right, so in conclusion, I wanted to talk about the pros and cons of the device. So one of the pros would be that if you want to have a different looking smartphone, the KODAK Ektra definitely looks a little bit different. Actually, it looks more like a camera, not like a phone. Other things include that hardware components assure a pretty smooth user interface performance and quite decent gaming performance. Also, the phone has a pretty decent display. However, there is the entire list of shortcomings about the KODAK Ektra. First of all, the camera. Yeah, it looks impressive on paper and looks actually impressive in reality once you see that huge camera bump, but the images taken with the KODAK Ektra, they don't look as good as the ones taken with the Samsung Galaxy S7 Edge. So in general, KODAK aimed to produce a good camera phone, I mean one of the best camera phones, but it kind of failed in this department. Well, you can definitely take some good looking photos with a KODAK Ektra, but the image quality is simply not on par with the best phones, and once you see that huge camera bump, you actually expect the KODAK Ektra to be the best camera phone. Alright, so another thing that I wanted to talk about is the overall look and feel and the build quality of the device. As I said, once you hold the phone vertically, like you would hold any smartphone, it's not really comfortable to hold it due to that huge grip on the bottom. Also, we don't have any premium materials used in the construction. For example, we have the plastic frame that goes all around the device. I mean, it's some sort of a metal imitation, but it would have been nice to see the actual metal, so the phone would look and feel much more expensive and much more premium in the hand. Other things that I wanted to say is that I keep pressing the volume button to turn the display on. That means that the button placement is not really convenient. Also, I don't like the black bezels that go all around the device. I mean, the phone has a pretty huge footprint, but those huge black bezels, I mean, they don't look that good. Finally, let's talk about the specifications. You know, the phone costs $550, but it has the Helio X20 chip, 3GB of RAM and 32GB of internal storage. I mean, that's kind of okay, the phone runs smoothly, but for this amount of money, I would expect to see at least Snapdragon 820 processor, like at least 4GB of RAM, and you know, I say that for this amount of money you can buy a much more powerful device. Alright, so in conclusion, would I recommend the KODAK Ektra to buy if you're, for example, a smartphone photography enthusiast? Well, I would say no, because the phone costs $550 and it is simply underpowered in all departments, in camera, in internal hardware, and for this price you can find much better devices like the OnePlus 3T, ZTE Accent 7, and you know, finally, this phone aimed to be like a super camera smartphone king, etc., but I can't say it takes the best pictures and it's not even on par with the latest and greatest flagships. It was Linus, thanks for watching, and if you guys have any questions or thoughts that you want to share about the KODAK Ektra, please drop me a comment down below. Also, please subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and follow TechLineHD on Facebook, on Twitter, and on Instagram. See you in the next video soon.